March 15, 1944, Japanese Naval Intelligence Headquarters, Yotsuya Communications Unit, Tokyo, Japan. Commander Atsuzo Kurihara stared at the intercept, his third cup of bitter tea cooling on his desk. For the past 18 hours, he and his team, Japan's finest cryptographers, had been laboring to break what appeared to be a tactical U.S. Marine Corps communication originating from the Marshall Islands operation. The sounds coming over their receivers defied every analytical technique in their arsenal. "Diné Bizaad," one of his analysts, Captain Yoshiro Tanaka, whispered, replaying a fragment. These were not random noises. The pattern indicated a structured military communication. Its timing preceded American attacks. The duration was consistent with operational orders, and its frequency usage matched Marine Corps protocols. Yet the language itself remained impenetrable, unlike anything in their vast archives of Allied communication systems. Kurihara led one of the world's most sophisticated signals intelligence operations. The Yotsuya facility, formerly the Azusa unit, employed 500 people, operating 118 radio receivers and 20 direction finders. His cryptographers had successfully cracked U.S. diplomatic traffic, British naval communications, and codes from several armies. They had even penetrated the State Department's Purple Code before Pearl Harbor, giving Japan crucial intelligence during the war's early years. Yet, these Marine transmissions represented a complete cryptographic failure. After 3 years of war and deciphering dozens of Allied codes, Japan's best minds could not discern the basic patterns of these mysterious communications. What Kurihara did not know, and what no Japanese intelligence officer would grasp until after the war, was that he was listening to the only unbroken code in modern military history. The story starts not in the Pacific, but in the American Southwest, where for centuries the Navajo people had preserved a language unlike any other on Earth. Diné Bizaad, the Navajo language, belongs to the Athabascan language family, with an estimated 170,000 speakers in 1940, confined almost entirely to the 27,000 square-mile reservation spanning Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and Colorado. The linguistic features that would baffle Japanese cryptographers had evolved over millennia. Navajo is fundamentally verb-oriented. Actions are described via complex combinations of prefixes that can run into millions of possibilities. The language employs 4 distinct tones: high, low, rising, and falling, which completely alter word meanings. A slight mispronunciation not only changes a word, but can render an entire sentence incomprehensible. The phonology includes sounds absent from Japanese, English, and most world languages. There are ejective stops, where air explodes using the glottis, a voiceless lateral fricative, sounding like wind through teeth, glottalized sonorants, and nasalized vowels. For Japanese speakers, trained in a language with only 5 vowel sounds, listening accurately for these phonemes was virtually impossible. Philip Johnston understood this linguistic fortress's military potential. Born in 1892 to a Protestant missionary on the Navajo reservation, Johnston grew up speaking fluent Navajo. He was one of fewer than 30 non-Navajo globally who could boast such an ability. By age 9, he was translating his father's sermons. By 15, he had traveled to Washington to translate for Navajo leaders, meeting President Theodore Roosevelt. In December 1941, as America reeled from Pearl Harbor, Johnston read of Army units using Comanche speakers in Louisiana training exercises. The Choctaw had served in World War I, but those efforts were improvised and limited. Johnston envisioned something revolutionary, a formal military code based on Navajo that would be both unbreakable and practical for modern warfare. On February 28, 1942, Johnston presented his proposal to Major General Clayton Vogel at Camp Elliott near San Diego. The demonstration was remarkable. 4 Navajos from Los Angeles transmitted messages as Marine officers timed their performance against standard procedures. The Navajo speakers completed the transmission in 20 seconds versus the 30 minutes required for the M209 cipher machine. General Vogel authorized a pilot program. On May 4, 1942, 29 Navajo recruits were enlisted at Fort Wingate, New Mexico. These men, including Chester Nez, Carl Gorman, Lloyd Oliver, and John Benally, came from across the reservation. Some had attended boarding schools where speaking Navajo was forbidden and harshly punished. Others were traditional herders who rarely left their ancestral lands. At Camp Elliott, they worked in a closed, guarded building for 8 weeks, creating a military code within their native language. The task was monumental. Develop terminology for concepts non-existent in Navajo, create an alphabetical system, and ensure memorability and expandability. They built the code through cultural logic. A submarine became Bashalo, ironfish that swims under the surface. A battleship was Lotso, the whale, the largest creature in the ocean. Fighter planes were Tahiti-High, hummingbirds that dart through the air. Bombers were Jesho, vultures that circle before descending. The alphabet required special creativity. Each letter needed multiple Navajo words to prevent frequency analysis. The letter E, the most common in English, received 4 alternatives. Code talkers would randomly alternate between the options, thus destroying any pattern. They developed 201 initial terms, memorizing everything perfectly. No codebook could risk capture. Chester Nez recalled, "We practiced endlessly. One mistake could cost lives. In our culture, words have power. Speaking correctly was sacred." The code's first test came at Guadalcanal in August 1942. 15 code talkers landed with the 1st Marine Division. The Japanese expected the invasion, having decoded other Allied communications. But suddenly, the Marines' tactical messages became incomprehensible. At the Japanese 8th Fleet headquarters in Rabaul, intelligence officers scrambled to understand these transmissions. Lieutenant Kazuo Yamada, educated at Stanford before the war, reported, "The sounds are structured like a language with consistent patterns, but they do not match anything. Not English, French, Dutch, Spanish, no Philippine dialect, no Chinese dialect, completely alien." The Japanese response was systematic. They assigned top crypto-analysts, recorded hundreds of hours on wax cylinders, and applied every analytical technique. They consulted university linguists and even Buddhist monks who studied ancient languages. Nothing worked. On November 8, 1942, code talker Chester Nez transmitted artillery coordinates that destroyed a Japanese machine gun nest. The 14-second transmission was intercepted but remained meaningless noise to the Japanese operators. Within minutes, American shells fell with precision on the target. Colonel Haruo Konuma, intelligence officer for the 17th Army, wrote, "The Americans have deployed a code that defeats every attempt. We can no longer anticipate attacks. We are fighting blind." Joe Kailumia, a Navajo soldier captured at Bataan in April 1942, became Japan's best hope for breaking the code. Although he was a fluent Navajo speaker, he had zero knowledge of the military code being developed. When Japanese cryptographers began intercepting the Navajo transmissions, they brought Kailumia to the Auna Interrogation Center. They made him listen to the code talker recordings. Kailumia heard Navajo words, but in combinations that made no sense to him. "The turtle is attacking the iron fish. The hummingbird is carrying eggs." When he could not translate, the interrogators accused him of lying. The abuse escalated systematically for months. In the winter of 1943, they forced him to stand naked in the snow until his feet froze to the ground. They starved him until he weighed 90 pounds, offering food for translations. Despite everything, Kailumia could only repeat the truth. He understood the words, but not their military meaning. A Japanese intelligence report from May 1943 documented their frustration. The prisoner appears native to the mysterious language, yet cannot comprehend the messages. Assessment: either extraordinary resistance or the enemy uses a specialized code within the native tongue requiring specific training. The second assessment was correct. Even fluent Navajo speakers could not understand without training. Kailumia survived 3.5 years of captivity. His inability to help convinced Japanese intelligence they were facing something unprecedented. By late 1943, they largely abandoned attempts to decode the Navajo transmissions. Success at Guadalcanal led to immediate expansion. Major General Alexander Vandergrift wrote, "The Navajo communicators have proved invaluable. Their transmissions are faster than any coding device and absolutely secure." A formal code talker school at Camp Pendleton began processing classes every 8 weeks. By the war's end, between 375 and 420 Navajo Marines had served as code talkers in all 6 divisions. The training was unlike anything in Marine Corps history. Recruits practiced in soundproof booths, while instructors piped in battlefield noises. They transmitted while wearing gas masks and running to exhaustion. Thomas Begay, who enlisted at age 15, described, "They pushed us beyond what was possible. Lives depended on our precision. The code was sacred. The code continually evolved. New technology required new vocabulary. The atomic bomb became Ayeshi, metal egg. Kamikaze pilots were Neti, wind of death. Every addition was logical to Navajo speakers, but incomprehensible to outsiders." By mid-1943, Japanese intelligence dedicated substantial resources to breaking the code. The Imperial Navy's 4th Section assigned 30 crypto-analysts exclusively to these transmissions. Captain Yoshiro Tanaka tried innovative approaches: musical analysis for tonal patterns, comparison with Native American recordings, consulting scholars who had studied in America. They developed special recording equipment to slow the transmissions without distorting the tone. Lieutenant Commander Masao Yamada later revealed they identified some patterns: probable call signs, correlation between message length and operation complexity, but without understanding the words, these provided minimal value. Japanese forces received orders to capture Marine communication personnel alive. Rewards of 10,000 yen, 10 years' salary, were offered for code talker equipment or materials. Several close calls occurred, but no code talker was ever captured with his equipment intact. The Central Pacific Campaign proved the code talker's strategic importance. At Tarawa, in November 1943, 6 code talkers maintained communications throughout 76 hours of brutal fighting. Lloyd Oliver transmitted continuously for 48 hours, coordinating naval gunfire despite constant shelling. At Saipan, 24 code talkers operated day and night. Lieutenant Commander Takeshi Furukawa had decoded conventional communications to anticipate the invasion. But once the Marines landed, tactical intelligence vanished. Colonel Takeshi Saito noted, "Commanders felt abandoned without the intelligence they depended on." At Peleliu, code talker Jimmy King transmitted for 6 hours during a counterattack after his partner was killed. He coordinated artillery for 3 battalions, sending 40 flawless messages under direct fire. The Battle of Iwo Jima marked the code talker's single greatest contribution. Major Howard Connor coordinated the entire initial assault via the Navajo Code. 6 code talkers worked in teams, maintaining continuous communication during the crucial first 48 hours of the invasion. General Tadamichi Kuribayashi had prepared for 2 years, building an underground fortress with 11 miles of tunnels. His defensive plan hinged on intercepting American communications to trigger counterattacks. This plan failed completely. In 48 hours, the 6 code talkers sent and received over 800 messages flawlessly. They coordinated the landing of 30,000 Marines, naval gunfire from 100 ships, close air support, enemy positions, medical evacuations, resupply, and tactical orders, all under constant fire. Major Connor later testified, "If it hadn't been for the Navajos, the Marines would never have taken Iwo Jima." Colonel Shigeo Hayashi reported to Kuribayashi that the American codes remained unbroken. Artillery requests completed in 20 seconds via Navajo would have taken 30 minutes conventionally, the difference between destroying positions and losing them. Japanese forces attempted to jam communications and mimic voices, but they could not reproduce the tonal qualities of Navajo. Lieutenant Hiroshi Miyamoto attempted to imitate Navajo, but his attempt sounded, according to code talker Alfred Newman, like someone gargling while trying to talk. On August 14, 1945, code talker Teddy Draper transmitted the most significant message of the war: Nehemiah Edegini Adenil, the Japanese surrender. The message passed through Navajo faster than it passed through conventional channels, a fitting end to the code talkers' war. After the war, American interrogators uncovered the extent of the Japanese efforts and their complete failure. Lieutenant General Seizo Arisue, head of Japanese intelligence, admitted, "We never broke the Marine Code." Captain Yasuji Kawamoto was specific. "We recorded thousands of transmissions. Our best linguists studied them for 3 years. Nothing worked. It was our single greatest cryptanalytic failure. The inability to read Marine communications cost thousands of lives. Every Marine operation after 1942 was a mystery until it began. The program remained classified for potential use in the Cold War. The code talkers returned home, unable to discuss their service with anyone. They returned to states that denied them the right to vote until 1948, New Mexico and Arizona, and 1957, Utah. They were heroes who could not reveal their heroism. Code talker Chester Nez, the last of the original 29, who died in 2014, wrote, "We were warriors who helped win the war, but we couldn't tell anyone. The weight was heavy." Many found healing through traditional ceremonies. Dan Aki explained, "We had used our language to direct death. We needed it for healing. The ceremonies reminded us that our language was sacred." In 1968, the program was declassified. The most significant recognition came on July 26, 2001, when President Bush presented congressional gold medals to the original 29 in the Capitol Rotunda. Only 5 originals survived to attend. The Navajo Code introduced cultural encryption security via language barriers that no mathematics could overcome. This influenced post-war intelligence operations. The concept remains relevant even today, as quantum computing threatens mathematical cryptography. Colonel David Hatch assessed, "They achieved something unique, a code never broken, never compromised. It proved that human linguistic capability could overcome mechanical cryptography." Today, Navajo is recognized as strategically important. Young Native Americans study ancestral languages with new pride. They proved that indigenous languages are not museum pieces, but living assets. The Japanese failure was not just a tactical defeat, but a fundamental blindness. They prepared for American technology and codes, not for American diversity, the languages and cultures they could not access. The empire that proclaimed racial superiority was defeated in part by that very diversity. Lieutenant General Arisue's admission that Japan never deciphered the code used by the Marines acknowledges they were challenging an opponent whose strength came from incomprehensible sources. The code talkers embodied an America that Japanese ideology could not accommodate. They proved that America's greatest strength was not industrial capacity but human diversity. The unbroken code remains unbroken, alive in every native child who speaks the ancestral language with pride, in every recognition that minority contributions strengthen identity, in every understanding that differences make us stronger together. The code talkers sent messages that Japan never decoded, but their greatest message was universal. Diversity brings strength. Culture brings power. Indigenous knowledge serves modern purposes. The young Navajos who used their sacred language as a weapon and then as a tool for peace demonstrated forever that America's greatest cryptography is diversity itself, unbreakable, because it arises from limitless human experience and wisdom. The code talkers proved our differences are strengths to be celebrated, the eternal proof that many voices, peoples, and languages, united yet diverse, create the unbroken code of liberty itself.